Hey church, Pastor Shane here with another community group discussion starter video. This week we're in 1 Thessalonians chapter 4 as we kind of continue on through the book. And chapter 4 is kind of a turn in the book of 1 Thessalonians. The first half of the book, he's been thankful to God for the believers' faith in the city of Thessalonica, a church he started, spent a month with, but ended up leaving during a time of great persecution. And so he's just thankful to God through the first part of this book for the faith of these Thessalonians and really address their suffering and their difficulty, but that is part of following Jesus Christ, and that we mirror his suffering and difficulty, and that we also mirror his resurrection and the fact that we have eternal life. And so now that he's done, telling them how he wants to see them again and how thankful he is for their faith, his attention turns to encouraging them, that even though their faith is thriving, he wants to encourage them more and more, for them to continue to grow in their faith in Jesus Christ. And this week he encouraged them to grow, and it says in the passage literally, for them to grow more and more in the area of holiness, to be set apart, to be different than their surrounding culture, to becoming more like Jesus every day. And that's what holiness really is. I mean, if you've never really slowed down and thought about this word holiness that we kind of use very often, but don't always slow down and think about. Holiness means to be set apart or distinct. So we think of God as holy as that he is set apart in his absolute moral purity, and he is set apart in his transcendent otherness, right? There's no one like him. But when we say that we are holy, it means that we are becoming more like Christ, that we are not just like in our natural state or like our surrounding country, but we've been set apart for God and by God to grow and change the way what we value and what we believe, but also in the way that we act. And so he encourages them to holiness, and then he kind of zooms in on one area in particular, which was sexual immorality. Really comfortable topic to talk about, right, everybody? But it's in there, and it's an important. We talked a little bit about the point of why this is so important to God, even though many people wonder, why does God care about any of this stuff? And it's because that our sexual ethic is developed based on who God created us to be. That he created sexual intimacy and those things for a purpose. And if we're doing anything that's outside of that purpose, well, it's going to be bad for us. It's going to rob people of dignity, and it's going to hurt people when we do that, which is what Paul is encouraging the people with here. And in fact, he says God takes these things really seriously. He says that he's an avenger, is the words he uses. He's an avenger of these things. I thought I'd address that one a little bit more where I didn't in the sermon. When he says that, it makes you wonder, well, what does that mean? There's going to be some huge consequence if I've had some of this sexual sin in my past, or maybe there's even right now some issue that I am struggling with. And the answer is, well, yes, there are consequences for our sin. We can't escape that. There are going to be earthly consequences for the things that we do. Sometimes there won't be any consequences. And when that happens, we're kind of spared and show a lot of grace and mercy. Sometimes there are consequences, and we have to live with those consequences. However, it's not saying that God has completely turned his back on people. In fact, God has done the opposite. That God has sent Jesus for us, that if we have done wrong, which all of us have at one time or another, that we might find forgiveness in Jesus Christ. And so, while yes, God is an avenger of these things, he cares about these things, he designed humans to operate in a certain way, and doing otherwise is hurtful, he's also made a way for us to find forgiveness, and we need to remember that as well. And that also helps us when we come into contact with this issue in our culture, understand that we might offer the forgiveness that comes with the gospel and compassion for those who struggle with any and all the issues kind of related to sexual immorality that we talked about within our verses. But ultimately where we ended our talk, and really where what this passage is calling us to, is not to worry so much about outsiders, but for us to become holy and to pursue holiness in our own lives, to become more and more holy, like it talks about here in the passage. And so that's what your discussion is going to really focus on and deal with as you kind of figure out these things. And you should be asking yourself, where should I be pursuing God right now? What is the area of my life that I need to be pursuing holiness, growing to become more like Jesus? And it could be an area of sexual immorality where you face a lot of temptation. It could be in an area of the kind of honesty that you have with other people. It could be an area like forgiveness. It could be pursuing your marriage in a much stronger way, in a much more focused way. I don't know what that is for you. So you have to think about that. And it's worth thinking about, because God desires our sanctification, our becoming holy. It even said that here in the passage. It's the will of God, your sanctification, that you grow closer and more like Jesus. So I want to encourage you to really take this seriously in the discussion. Really find an area. Where is God working in my life? Where could God work in my life? How do I need to be growing right now? And asking for God's help, and He is faithful to give it. I hope you have a great discussion.